Some stories don't begin with fireworks or declarations. They begin with something smaller, a moment, unplanned, unforced. The feeling that someone has just wandered into your life and made it feel a little more alive. Welcome to Men Being Too Intimate, an audio story series exploring what happens when two men blur the emotional lines between kindness, connection, and something they don't have to name just yet. 8 episodes, 8 MBTI pairings, 8 moments that linger longer than expected. In today's story, we meet an ENFP. Bright, spontaneous, always chasing moments he can feel. And an INFP. Rooted, observant, with a heart too quiet to show itself right away. They meet in Tallinn. One is passing through. The other has never left. For 3 days, they share something small and quiet and fleeting. A walk, a breakfast, a night that stayed longer than it should have. No promises, no forever, just the time they had. This is Men Being Too Intimate. The time we had? Tallinn is quiet in September. Still warm enough to leave the door open. Cool enough that the coffee steams longer in the cup. Axel is behind the counter. The shop has been his since his grandfather passed. 3 tables by the window, not for laptops, only for people who read. If you buy a book, you get a coffee. Otherwise, this place isn't for you. Today is quiet, the way he likes it. Then the bell chimes, everyone looks up, just for a second. And Axel sees him. The man glances at someone sipping from a ceramic cup by the window, then at the travel shelf. Then at the espresso machine tucked beside a bookshelf. Axel stays where he is, elbows on the counter, arms crossed. Watching. Then the man's eyes finally find his. It's not a stare, not a moment heavy with anything, just a glance. Hey, where do I order coffee? You don't. Right? Not a cafe? Nope. Bookshop. Got it. You buy a book, you get a coffee. That's the system. Interesting. Hey, I'll make one, on the house. I appreciate that. He turns away to the small espresso machine tucked between the shelves. It hums low as he moves, measured, practiced. No wasted motion, no small talk. Just the quiet sounds of grinding beans, steam, and something that feels unexpectedly personal. When he turns back, it's with a warm ceramic cup in one hand and a slightly worn Tallinn tourist guidebook in the other. Here. Free coffee and a guidebook. Just pretend you bought it. Locals will complain if you sit around drinking for free. The man chuckles broad, easy, takes the book, takes the coffee, and with a small, deliberate pause. My lips are sealed. I'm Miles, by the way. I'm Axel. He says it like it's nothing, but something about the way Miles repeats it quietly, like he's trying it on, makes it feel like the beginning of something. Back behind the counter, Axel runs through the motion stock, checks register tally, a delivery slip with the corner torn. Across the room, Miles is still there sipping, flipping through the guidebook, one leg stretched under the table. He doesn't seem in a rush to leave. Axel eventually walks over. Miles doesn't look up right away. Everything good? Yeah, thanks for the coffee, by the way. What's Pat Cooley like? Axel was about to turn, but Miles taps a finger on the guidebook, the page barely creased. One question turns into a few more. Not just what to see, but where to eat. Axel answers, not flatly, but with a kind of reluctant ease. Naming a hidden bakery, a gallery down a side street, a dumpling place he claims is a little dramatic but solid. If you want to go up Pat Cooley tonight, I could show you. City looks different after dark. He said it like it wasn't a big deal. Like he hadn't just offered to walk a stranger through the city at night. I'd like that. Miles answered. Just like that, they agree to meet at 7. Miles stands. Closes the guidebook with a soft thump. Thanks for the loan, he says. Axel takes it without a word, just a small nod. The kind that says, you're welcome. Maybe more than you know. Miles lingers a second longer at the door, then glances back. That same look. A wink again. By night, the bookstore is quiet. Golden evening light spills across worn wood floors. Axel stands behind the counter, doing absolutely nothing, except watching time pass. 7 p.m. Still no sign. He rests his hands on the counter, taps once. Then again, waits. 7:07 p.m. The quiet begins to press in. He exhales slowly, then grabs the key from its little hook near the register. Just as he steps out, "Hey, wait!" Axel turns. There's Miles, jogging into view, sweat on his brow, shirt clinging slightly at the collar, but not out of breath. Not even close. He slows to a walk as he nears, raising a sheepish hand. "Sorry. I swear I left early, but the cobblestone roads around here are confusing." Axel doesn't answer right away. He just watches him. Something about it catches him off guard. The way Miles ran that far, probably the last few blocks, yet barely winded. Without a word, Axel turns back into the shop. A moment later, he reemerges holding a folded cloth. He offers it plain and simple, a white handkerchief. Soft from many washes, Miles takes it, surprised but grateful. "Thanks." He dabs his forehead, then looks up. "Come on. It's better before the light fades." And, together, they begin walking. They walked side by side, footsteps echoing on the uneven cobblestones of the old town. Around them, the city softened, shop shutters closing with gentle clacks. Flower boxes spilling over windowsills, the distant chime of a bell marking the hour. Miles took in everything, his gaze moving like someone trying to memorize it all. At the top of the climb, the view unfolded all at once. The city stretched below them in layers, rooftops glowing in the dusk, windows catching the last of the light. In the distance, the sea shimmered, still and quiet like brushed metal. Miles slowed. And though no one said anything, the silence between them shifted. They stopped at the edge of the Pakuli viewing platform, Tallinn glowing beneath them. The city felt timeless from here. Miles let out a breath. "Wow." Axel didn't answer. He just watched the way the light caught Miles' profile, how his eyes scanned rooftops like they meant something. How he was quiet for once. Miles turned to him slowly, the view still shimmering behind them. "Thanks for bringing me up here," he said, voice quieter now. "And for the book and the list and just everything today." Axel gave a small nod but didn't speak. Miles smiled, more certain now. "I want to return the favor. Let me buy you dinner." Axel hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because he wasn't used to being offered things. Before he could reply, Miles reached out and gently took his hand. Not as a gesture of romance, just insistence. "You're not allowed to say no," Miles added, grin tilted, just enough to make it feel like a challenge. Axel wasn't used to touch, not like this. And yet something passed through his chest then. They left the overlook with no real plan. The city around them was slowing down, shops dimming one by one, the air cooling into something more comfortable. Miles walked lightly, like someone who hadn't yet decided where the day should end. He mentioned offhandedly what he hadn't gotten to try yet, not just sights, but tastes, local things. Comfort food. He listed dishes he'd heard about, mispronounced a few with a laugh. Axel listened without interrupting. And when Miles fell quiet, content just to stroll, Axel wordlessly shifted their direction. After listening and taking in all the things Miles wanted to try and likes, Axel led Miles somewhere close. Not a tourist restaurant or anything dressed up. Just a little place tucked behind a florist's shop where the sign was half faded and the menu was scribbled in chalk. Inside, the tables were mismatched wood, the lights soft and low. Axel ordered without fanfare. Something simple, something good, beetroot salad, black rye bread, hot smoked fish, and mushroom stew served in a clay bowl. Miles grinned when the plates arrived, already half in love with the scent of dill and warm butter. He tried everything. They talked over dinner without urgency or show. Miles opened up more easily than Axel expected, not in a performative way, but with the relaxed rhythm of someone used to crossing paths with strangers, knowing some meetings stayed longer than others. He was nearing the end of a 3-week trip across Eastern Europe, he said. Budapest, Prague, Vilnius, Riga, and now Tallinn. His last stop before flying home in 2 days. He was from California, though not the loud, sun-soaked version people usually imagined, a smaller town up the coast. He lived alone now after a breakup last year. It wasn't a story he offered details on, but it hovered quietly in how he talked about the freedom of this trip. Axel listened. And when the moment felt right, he shared just a little in return. That he'd been to Vilnius and Riga, quick trips, not long stays, but never Prague, never Budapest, and never California. He said simply that maybe one day he'd go. Miles leaned in a little more as the meal went on, not in volume, but in attention. His questions shifted from the travel-friendly, what to see, what to try, what to avoid, to something softer, what it was like to actually live here. He asked about the rhythm of real days, where people bought their bread, how neighbors treated each other, what Axel did when he wasn't tucked between pages and coffee cups. And Axel, who wasn't always used to being asked, answered without deflecting. Maybe not with everything, but with enough. He spoke of a quieter side of the city, the parts beyond the cobblestone charm, the slower mornings, the neighborhood cafes that didn't translate their menus, the open markets where old women still brought berries in wicker baskets. He told him about his home, a small flat in one of the rougher concrete apartment blocks just outside the center. Post-Soviet, boxy, a little gray. Not beautiful, but real. Axel said, simply, that Miles could come by tomorrow. If he wanted a better picture of things, just morning light and real life. Something more than a story told over stew. Miles smiled, warm and certain. I'd love to see it. The bookstore opens at noon. Come by around 9. We'll have breakfast, then head back into town. Dinner ended without hurry. No check rush, no last-minute confessions. Outside, the streetlights had come on, soft and golden, catching in the puddles between uneven stone. They walked slowly back to the corner where their ways split. Miles turned to him, eyes a little gentler now. Thanks for tonight. And before Axel could say anything, Miles stepped forward and gave Axel a quiet hug. Nothing expectant. Just a good night and a see you tomorrow folded into one. Axel stood there a moment longer after they parted, watching Miles go. Then he turned the other way toward the side of the city that didn't have postcards. Miles sat in the back of the taxi, watching the windows bead with water as the familiar charm of Tallinn faded behind him. Outside, the city changed. Pastel cafes giving way to rain-slicked roads, wires drooping between poles and the concrete bones of the city's Soviet past. The taxi slowed near a block of weather-worn apartment buildings. They looked tired, heavy. Faded green stairwells with steel doors, balconies stacked like crates. Rain trickled down the cracked facade as if the buildings themselves were still waking up. Inside, the stairwell was dim and quiet, walls marked by years of patch-ups and peeling paint. But the moment Axel opened his door, the air shifted. The home was small, but full of color. Woven textiles, potted plants, a calendar with handwritten notes in the corner. The warmth of the kitchen spread through the room like it belonged there. Axel's mother glanced up from the pan with a knowing smile. No surprise in her eyes, only welcome. Miles held up the bag sheepishly. I brought coffee. And bread. She nodded approvingly and gestured toward the table. The table was fuller than expected. A proper Estonian breakfast, not something from habit, but something prepared. There were boiled eggs, open-faced smoked herring sandwiches, pickled beets, fresh curd cheese with herbs, cucumber ribbons, homemade jam, potato pancakes still steaming, and a pot of black tea steeping next to honeycomb in a small dish. The rye bread Miles brought was sliced and placed in a woven basket as if it had always been part of the meal. Conversation was light, mostly quiet. Axel and his mother exchanged a few words in Estonian. Miles watched the rain blur the window and let the stillness settle in. After the meal, Axel poured more tea and nodded toward the hallway. Want to see the rest? Miles followed. The apartment was narrow, but every corner had something lived in, stacked books, wool blankets, a coat hook shaped like a fish. Axel opened the door to his room. A small space, a desk with worn edges. A poster peeling at the corner. A single bed tucked under the window. In the living room, above an old sideboard, hung a faded photograph. A black and white portrait of a man standing in front of a small storefront with books in the window. That's my grandfather, Axel said. The shop used to be his. Now it's mine. Miles leaned closer. So it runs in the family? Axel shrugged. Guess so. Eventually, the sky began to shift. The rain slowed. Hints of pale light began to stretch across the clouds. They didn't linger. The rain had lightened to a hush, and soon they were pulling on coats again, stepping out into the damp morning. At the corner, they caught the local bus, one of the older ones still rattling from stop to stop. The kind where the windows fogged quickly and the seats cracked when you sat. It was full of everyday life. Workers heading in, school kids yawning. Someone with a small bundle of rowan branches wrapped in old newspaper. Miles sat beside Axel, the smell of city, rain, and bread drifting in every time the doors opened. The bus rattled down the wet streets, brakes sighing at each stop. When they reached the old city center, the bus hissed to a stop. They stepped off into the waking square where puddles shimmered in stone cracks and the rain had softened to mist. Axel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. He handed it over without ceremony. "It's not much, just a map. Some shortcuts and spots worth seeing." Miles unfolded it. There were hand-drawn arrows, coffee cup doodles, and little notes like, "This alley smells like fresh bread at 11 a.m. Good view here, but bring a jacket. Cut through here or you'll get lost." "Thanks," Miles said, running his thumb along the edge. Axel offered the faintest smile. "Hope you enjoy Tallinn," he said. Miles nodded. No hug, no plan. No see you later, just a folded map. And the memory of warm tea, curd cheese, and a morning that wasn't asking for anything more. The key turned in the lock with a low click. Axel pushed the door open and stepped inside. The bookshop was dim, quiet, still holding the cold from the night. He moved through the usual routine without thought. Lights on, one row at a time. The space slowly warmed, not just in temperature but in mood. Axel paused behind the counter, glanced out at the empty street. By midday, the clouds had cleared and Tallinn stretched out in quiet rhythm. Miles moved through its cobbled streets with Axel's map folded in his coat pocket, soft from use. He didn't follow it exactly. That wasn't the point. But he kept finding the places marked with little sketches, a crooked alley that smelled faintly of bread, a bench near a quiet overlook, an archway that felt like the entrance to another world. There was a note beside one turn. "Don't walk too fast here." "Just don't." Miles slowed. The alley opened into a quiet square, flanked by an old church, its stone worn soft by time. Above, a bell began to chime. He stood still until the bell stopped. As night hit, Axel moved through the aisles slowly. He folded the linen cloth that had covered the window display, then turned toward the back. Axel grabbed his coat, half shrugging into it. Then, through the pane of the door, he saw someone standing across the street. The street lamp behind Miles cast a golden wash onto the wet stones. And, for a second, neither of them said anything. Miles had one hand tucked into his jacket pocket. In the other, he held a small paper bag, slightly damp at the corners. "I brought something." Axel blinked. Miles smiled, lifting the paper bag. Red wine, cheese I couldn't pronounce, something smoked that might be ham, and a warm paper cone of honey peanuts from a street cart. Couldn't resist. Smelled like childhood. Axel blinked. "Like whose childhood?" Miles grinned. "Not mine, but I figured someone's." Axel looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." The shop door creaked gently as it shut behind them, muffling the outside world. Inside, the shelves leaned like old friends. The room was warm with the hush of unread stories. Axel flicked on only the small desk lamp near the register. Miles placed the bag on the counter and began unpacking it without instruction. They ended up sitting on the wooden floor between the travel section and Baltic poetry. The wine was opened with an old corkscrew Axel kept behind the counter. There were no wine glasses, only 2 chipped ceramic mugs, one with a faded Goethe quote. They passed the food between them. Slices torn from the loaf, a piece of cheese balanced on top, a curl of smoked meat folded over like ribbon. No music played, just the soft sounds of chewing, the quiet sip of wine, and their voices as the night began to unspool. Their legs stretched out in opposite directions like the arms of a crooked compass. Between them, the wine bottle sat uncorked, sweating slightly. The cheese and ham were half-eaten. The candied peanuts had vanished within minutes. Axel shared stories of the shop's earliest days, of his grandfather's rules. No loud music, no pens on the register, no politics at the front door. Miles talked about cities he didn't quite belong to, jobs that almost made sense, people who stayed too long or not long enough. They traded little truths like coins. Music they liked, books they never finished, the exact number of heartbreaks that still ached when named. Outside, the last light slipped out of the sky. Inside, something else was settling. The laughter came less often now, but when it did, it lingered. Silences began to hold their own shape, not awkward, not unsure, just quieter. Closer. Axel looked over. Miles had gone still. His expression was unreadable, not distant, just waiting. Not for permission, not for a sign, just for the moment to finish unfolding. So Axel let it. He leaned in slowly, and Miles didn't move, not forward, not away. Their mouths met like a closing parenthesis. The kiss deepened, but nothing rushed. Miles's hand rose to Axel's jaw, fingers brushing along the edge of his neck. Axel exhaled into the contact, his own hand trailing down to the fabric just above Miles's knee. Neither of them moved to stand. The floor beneath them was old wood, creaking faintly beneath shifting weight. The bookshop around them stayed quiet, cloaked in the warmth of amber lamplight and the faint scent of paper and pine oil. They kissed again. The kind of kiss that knows it's being remembered. Eventually they did rise, not to leave, but to shift. They moved behind the counter into the little nook near the storage alcove, where a worn rug and low settee sat unused most days. There, with hands tugging at buttons and cotton, with breath catching against collarbones and fingertips slipping under waistbands, they let the quiet space carry them. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't performative. It was clumsy at times, a laugh muffled against skin, a book knocked from the edge of the seat, but neither pulled away. They moved together in a rhythm not dictated by time, but by trust. And when it ended, they stayed curled against each other, breath mingling, bodies warm from more than just the act itself. Axel glanced up, eyes tracing the shelves that lined the room. It still looked like his shop. Still smelled of pine oil and memory, but now it held something else, a moment, a night, a man. One he wasn't ready to let go of. They held each other for a long while after. Not speaking, just breathing. Skin to skin, warmth shared in the quiet space between the shelves. Axel's fingers traced slow, absent lines across Miles' back. Miles stirred, just enough to press a kiss to Axel's shoulder. Then he sat up slowly, reaching for his scattered clothes. Axel followed quietly, their glances meeting in the half-light. Miles pulled on his sweater and looked toward the door. "My hotel's close," he said, not with urgency, but as an invitation. Axel didn't answer right away. But he stood. And when Miles extended his hand, Axel took it, no hesitation this time. They left the shop together, locking the door behind them. The air was cold. The streetlights hummed. And, as they walked through Tallinn's old streets, hand in hand, something unspoken settled between them. Something that didn't need to be named. The next morning, Axel and Miles lay side by side, close but not tangled. Axel stirred first. He turned his head toward Miles, watching the soft rise and fall of his breath. Then, carefully, he slipped from under the sheets, walked to the bathroom, and closed the door behind him. The sound of running water filled the quiet. Miles blinked awake. He stayed still for a moment, grounding himself. The weight of goodbye already stirring in his chest. His bag sat half-packed by the chair. His phone blinked with the time. It was almost real now, the end of this chapter. He got up slowly, began folding his clothes, putting things back where they belonged, everywhere except his heart. Axel steps out, fully dressed, and adjusts the collar of his shirt. He gives Miles a small smile, the kind that tries to be casual but can't quite hide everything beneath it. "I'll be quick," Miles says, rising to finally take his turn in the shower. Axel nods, doesn't say much, just pulls his shoes on and grabs his phone from the nightstand. When the bathroom door closes behind Miles, the room feels different. And when Miles comes out, hair still damp, towel slung around his shoulders, Axel is gone, just the open curtain. The quiet hum of the heater, the smell of soap still clinging to the air. For a breath, Miles froze. He thought he left. Then, the soft buzz of the hotel door. He opened it. Axel stood there with 2 paper coffee cups in hand, croissant tucked inside. His coat was barely zipped. He looked a little winded, like he had run down and back just to catch the morning. Miles smiled, relief so obvious it hurt a little. Axel handed him the coffee. "I didn't want you flying without breakfast," he said. Miles took it. Not much more was said. The taxi came too soon. They stood outside the entrance as the driver loaded his bag. The wind had picked up, crisp and clear. Axel looked at him. Miles looked back. No speeches, no promises. Just a kiss, warm and full. And then a hug, tighter than either of them expected. When they stepped back, they were still smiling. "Take care," Axel said. Miles opened the taxi door. Paused. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." And then he got in. The car pulled away, turning the corner. Axel stood there until the taxi was gone. Then, quietly, he turned back toward the city. The city felt too loud, too fast, but the walk helped. And by the time he reached the shop, the silence was waiting. He unlocked the door, stepped inside. No lights yet. Just the soft hush of pages and dust and something unspoken. The air still held traces of the night before. Axel walks in and sees the mess they left behind. The wine bottle near the counter, 2 cups, rings dried at the bottom where the red had settled. Roasted honey peanuts on the floor. Evidence of something that felt too brief to be real. He doesn't rush to clean it. He moves slowly, like each item holds a memory he doesn't want to wipe away too fast. Then silence again. He wipes the table, stacks the cups. Folds the napkin Miles crumpled. Puts the peanuts in the trash. The shop feels emptier than it should. He turns toward the travel section. That little lane Miles lingered in. Fingers trail the spines, then stop. He pulls one book from the shelf. California. A pause. Then a soft smile. The spark and the stillness. One who lives for what's unfolding, the other who feels it before it begins. Together they found a rhythm. Not rushed, not planned, just felt. The ENFP, full of wonder, always looking forward. The INFP, full of meaning, quietly holding the now. Neither asked for forever, but neither will forget. That's what happens when men are too intimate. When a kiss says more than a promise ever could. This was Axel and Miles. A story of timing, of quiet rooms, slow mornings, and something soft they'll carry, long after goodbye.
Men being too intimate.